What it is, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, wherever you watch this garbage. So today's video is just going to kind of be a little two-parter. I'm going to give a little update on the wrecker, the little rat wrecker. And I figured maybe a little story time with Ed. Some people seem to like story time with Ed. If you don't, yeah, that's all right. Click off of it. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. There's really not a whole lot of exciting stuff going on in the shop. Of course, this project's been sitting here for a hot minute. You know, someday I'm going to get back on this thing. It is what it is. It's my own truck, so, you know, they always take a back seat to everybody else's stuff. Over in the bay, I've got a Jeep Wrangler doing rusty frame repair on it. And I got a motor swap and a Infinity outside. Yay. And just some other, you know, normal breakdowns, work on my sister's car, you know, family members' cars, you know, real exciting stuff. So let me spin you around here real quick, and we'll talk for a second on the wrecker project. So if you're following the channel, you know that I am building a wrecker very similar to that, and that's actually it way out back there. So it's a 75 F350. I'm going to do a Crown Vic swap in. So this is the Crown Vic front end. It's out of an 05 Crown Vic. It's actually out of a police car. And this is a very popular swap with these Ford trucks. Put these Crown Vic front ends in. Now I picked this one up. I'm going to haul it down to the car wash here maybe tomorrow and pressure wash it off and get it cleaned up. And it's going to go in on the front of the wrecker. And then that'll get the truck in the weeds. And then hopefully the diesel 7.3 will fit in there a little better. Now, I'm not affiliated with Rock Auto, but I just bought all the parts from Rock Auto. I bought upper control arms, lower ball joints, struts with springs, tie rods. I'm going to rebuild that whole front end before I put it in the truck. Actually, I'll fit it in the truck, then take it back out and rebuild it and bolt it in the truck. And if you, like I said, if you've been following the project, the whole thing was to leave the truck ratty, get it on the ground, be a tow truck with a 7.3 with a 5-speed. Don't know what rear we're going to use in it yet. I've got quite a few rears to pick from. I don't know if I'm going to put a 9-inch in it. I did buy the rear out of the Crown Vic, so I've got the 8.8 rear. I don't know if I'm going to use it or not. This truck's not really ever going to tow anything. It's going to be slammed, something cool, just something different. So, like I said, I'm not affiliated with Rock Auto, but I'll tell you, if you've got time to wait on parts, it's a great source to buy parts. I actually got Ford ball joints for this thing. So I was kind of back and forth. Do I buy like Moog? But I haven't had a lot of success with Moog in just my regular repairs. So I went with Ford ball joints. I did go with an aftermarket upper control arm because they did have grease fittings. I bought struts with springs. So the whole front end will be fresh when it goes back under the truck. Because I know, you know, it's going to have a 7.3 in it, which weighs 1 million tons. It's pretty heavy, so it's going to be a little heavy on the front end. And actually, all that stuff just came today. That whole pile of stuff there is all for that Crown Vic front end out there. So, hopefully everything goes well. I've got all the parts to actually put the Crown Vic in the truck. I just need to get the truck in the shop now. That's my biggest problem. Always got a million other things going on. Never enough time for your own stuff. But, you know, I'll make time for it. I always do somehow. So the reason, I did have somebody ask me on, I think TikTok, why am I putting Crown Vic subframe in a tow truck? Well, like I said before, this thing's not really going to be for towing cars. Although I am going to put, I'm putting the 7.3 IDI with a ZF 5-speed. I am putting the PTO and everything back on, so the winch and everything will work. But the 7.3 is a rear sump oil pan. In those trucks, the steering linkage and steering box is behind the factory crossmember. So I've got a huge clearance problem with oil pan, oil filter, everything's just in the way. Nothing's fitting right. The 7.3 just does not fit in there. And I already wanted to lower the truck anyway. So I decided, let's go ahead and just Crown Vic swap it. That'll get the truck down on the ground. It'll give it independent front suspension. It'll give it rack pinion steering. So the truck is really being built to be just something cool, but I want to be able to drive this thing. I want to be able to drive this thing, you know, a couple hours away, 3-4 hours away. I want to be able to get on the turnpike and roll. That's why I'm not sure what rear I want to use in it yet. I'm a little scared about the 8.8 rear because the body of the truck is pretty heavy. I don't know if the, over time, are the axle bearings going to hold up? Am I going to have an issue with axle bearings, or should this shoot right and go right for the 9-inch? Because the 9-inch, the one rear I have has big bearing. It's out of a Ranchero, so it's a pretty big bearing axle on the axle flanges on the sides. And then I've got to cut, and with putting a 9-inch in it, I can play around with I can just take the center chunk out and play with different gear ratios. Because I'm not sure with the 5-speed, do I want a 373 gear, or would it work better with a 300 gear? Again, I'm not towing anything. I want the thing to be highway friendly. I want to be able to put this thing in 5th gear and run 75, 80 mile an hour down a turnpike, and the motor, is barely turning. That's the ultimate goal, because I'm going to have air conditioning in the truck. Of course, obviously heat, but I want to be able to run down the turnpike at 80 mile an hour without this thing screaming. Like my rollback, it's a 93 Ford F450 with a 7.3 with the 5-speed. Same motor, same trans, but that thing has, it's a 450 chassis, and it's got a 513 gear. That truck does 55 mile an hour, like right around $2,000-ish, a little more than $2,000. It will do 60, but it's screaming. So I don't want this thing to be like that. I want this thing to be able to go down the turnpike. So that kind of brings you up to speed on the wrecker project. Like I said, I was hoping to be a little further along by now, but it's just been waiting on parts. I had to wait for the subframe. My guy had a little bit of health problems, so he didn't get a chance to burn out of the truck, out of the car fast enough, which that's fine, because I've had other things going on in the shop that I really didn't have time to tie the bay up for a week while I fooled with that thing, so that's okay. So this behind me is the 5.8 for, like, I don't have enough projects going on. Like I said, this pickup truck, that thing's been sitting there 3 years. So yeah, I need to start more projects. But I talked about earlier on the channel, if you're a regular follower, watcher, yada, 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 that I'm going to build another Bronco. I've got this ratty Bronco out back that I was going to build as a beach truck, mud truck, trail truck, yada, yada. So this 5.8's all ready to go in the Bronco. I dug the Bronco out from out back. It's around front now, finally. I get caught up on a couple of jobs. I just had to do brakes on my sister's car. I got some family members, I got to take care of their junk. And I get their junk taken care of, then I freeze up the shop. I might bring the Bronco in. I'd like to really bring the wrecker in. I'm trying to focus on just the wrecker, but I'm kind of stuck because I'm waiting on parts. So while I'm waiting on parts, I figured I'd fold the Bronco. I'm still waiting on some stuff for the actual Crown Vic swap. I bought some control arm mounts from a company called Outcast. They're like 2 or 3 weeks before I even get those parts. So I've got picking at another project in between. So that answers the questions of why am I bouncing a little bit. I'm bouncing because I don't have everything for the wrecker to do the swap just this second. Still waiting on a couple of things to come in that were ordered. So that brings you up to speed on the wrecker and this other Bronco project that I talked about doing. So that's pretty much about it. I figured maybe take a minute and I'll just tell a little story of how I got into tow trucks. So how I got into tow trucks. If you watched some of my other videos, I've kind of talked about I grew up in the automotive business. My father had a repair shop. My father actually, when I was young, he had a repair shop. And then as I got a little bit older, he got into sweeper trucks for cleaning parking lots. And that's another story, but the short version is he kind of inherited the sweeper business, and he was running the repair shop at the same time. And a lot of the contracts were coming up, and Pop really, he liked the sweeping business, but he didn't want to buy new trucks, and it was about time to buy new trucks. A lot of contracts were coming up. Pop really wanted a gas station, so he got out of the sweeping business, sold the trucks, closed the shop up, sold all the cars in the yard, and went and got this gas station. Gas station did have 3 repair bays, so he still was repairing cars and selling gas. That's what Pop wanted to do. And then later on, he got another gas station, and that's what he did. So I always wanted tow trucks. Pop didn't want tow trucks. I couldn't talk my Pop into tow trucks. And me and my Pop kind of, when I was younger, we didn't see eye to eye. We always rubbed heads. So I got to be about 19, 20 years old, and me and Pop had one of our falling outs, and I was renting a little one-bay shop with a buddy of mine, and I saved my money up, and I went out and I bought this little 75 F350 Holmes 440 wrecker. It was pretty rough, but it was mine. It was paid for. I paid cash for it. I went through the motor, I went through the brakes, I put all the cables on it, sling straps, got all the lights working, got this thing tagged, and I got hooked up with a guy that I'd met through some other people, and he did private property towing. So we did apartment complexes, you know, like cars that are abandoned, cars that are legally parked, cars parked in the fire lane, in front of dumpsters. So I kind of got hooked up with him because I owned my own truck, so I ran it under his name. We made a deal up. The truck was insured under him, but the truck was my truck. So we came up with a figure, and it worked real well for quite a few years. And I did that kind of towing for years. So basically, I did a lot of private property towing when I was younger. And we had a lot of fun. It was basically, you were basically stealing cars legally. It was a lot of fun. Now, remember, this was 30 years ago. You know, today's day, it's a lot different. Later on in life, about 10 years ago, I just closed up I owned a towing business. I closed it up about 10 years ago. So a lot of things have changed over the years, but when I was younger, we did private property towing, and we just had a blast. It was a lot of fun. We took cars from shopping centers. You know, a lot of these shopping centers, they don't want abandoned cars. They don't want tractor trailers there. I mean, the stuff we would go after was just insane. People would dump boats. They'd dump trailers. We'd haul all that stuff out. Now, like I said, 30 years ago, everybody had a sling truck. If you had a rollback 30 years ago, you were like, ooh, they got a lot of money. They got a rollback. It just was kind of, you know, maybe even a little more than 30 years now if I think about it. But, you know, they weren't as common as a sling truck was. So I learned a lot of stuff driving a sling truck. And then later on, I actually worked for a little guy up in Landenberg, PA. And that guy was an old mountain guy. And I loved that guy. He showed me a lot of stuff, how to get cars out of ditches with these trucks. I mean, he would take me up on the side of hills, and we'd get cars down in the valley with one wrecker and drag these cars up out of there and not even hurt the car. I mean, this guy was a wizard with these old trucks. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff from this guy. He was just, it was amazing. But I just always had a fascination with wreckers. And now that I'm older, I can kind of afford to buy these things and play with them. And that's kind of why I'm building I don't like the term rat wrecker, but why I'm building this truck is because brings me back to my old days when I ran these trucks regularly. Because nowadays, a sling truck is obsolete. Unless you're hauling junk, they're really obsolete. I do have one sling truck here that is an operational truck that I actually do use. It's it's 85 Chevy with a Nomar sling wrecker on it. The truck's got 70,000 miles on it. It's a nice little Chevy wrecker. I paid $1,500 for it. I think I've had 2 years now. It's a good little truck, and I use it for like state bodies, small little box trucks, and really just hauling junk. That's what I really use it for. I use it around the property here a lot, moving stuff. But I bought it just to use for that kind of stuff. Sometimes I buy something that's down in the woods. I'm not taking my rollback. I'll take that thing, and I'll run it down into the woods because it's a little easier to maneuver than, you know, long rollback. But today's times, sling trucks are really kind of obsolete because every car nowadays, there's no steel bumpers unless it's a pickup or a Jeep or something like that. Everything's got plastic bumpers. You'll destroy a new car today. Like I said, unless it's junk and you don't care. A sling truck's kind of obsolete anymore. But for hauling junk, they're great. So that's kind of why I'm building the old wrecker, is kind of take it back to my old days. It's funny when you run into these older guys, they're like, I had a 69 Camaro, now I want one because I'm retired. Well, I don't want a 69 Camaro. I kind of always like trucks, so I want to build an old wrecker. I'm building this one, and then when this one's done, I actually want to build a lifted one because, again, if you follow the channel, I used to have a four-wheel drive shop. I owned a four-wheel drive shop for many, many years. When I closed that shop and moved south, from up north, when I moved down south, that's when I started the towing business. The four-wheel drive thing in my area kind of took a hard dive in the early mid 2000s. It just took a nosedive through the 80s and the 90s. Of course, I started my shop when I was in the 90s. My four-wheel drive shop. I was young. Lifted trucks were like everywhere. So I installed a ton of lift kits, you know, building stuff like that's behind me. This F-150 with a 6-inch lift. That was common. A lot of Jeeps, Broncos, Blazers. But when we got into the early 2000s, you know, we went from here to kind of like, it just took a hard dive. The lifted truck thing took a hit. That's about when all the Honda craze started taking over. A lot of guys were doing Hondas. In fact, I started doing exhaust and stuff on those cars. And I'm not a big fan of Hondas or the tuner cars, but that was the big thing then. And I started working on them, and I'm like, man, I really just don't want to. This is not my thing. I'm just not into these cars at all. I mean, I'm making money at it, but it's just not my thing. And I bought a house 30 miles south of where the shop was, so I decided I'm done with the lifted truck thing. I'm done renting the shop. I'm going to move south. I moved south, and the town I moved to there was no towing service in the town. And I thought, this is interesting. Now, I'd already owned a rollback, and I still have my wrecker that I bought when I was 19 from the full dry shop. So I went, So I started a towing business, which was called MOTS, which is for the area. Everything in that area was called MOT, which stood for Middletown, which is the main town, Odessa, the next town, and Townsend. I added the S because a little further south is a town called Smyrna. So that's what if you see in the video, you see the truck says MOTS, MOTS. That's what it stood for. Middletown, Odessa, Townsend, Smyrna. And I ran that towing business for a long time. Roughly about 10 years ago, I was burned out. I just had enough. I tried to sell the business. Of course, you know, everybody wants to finance it. I'm not holding a note. I wasn't going to hold a note on a business. You wear the trucks out and decide, I don't want to pay for it no more. Nah, nobody had no real money, so I just pulled the plug on it. I owned all the equipment. I owned all the trucks. That's why this shop is so furnished. All this stuff was from my towing business. I kept a couple of the trucks, as you've seen in the videos in the background. I kept a couple rollbacks and sold all the other wreckers. These older wreckers I've recently all bought in the last 3 or 4 years. And just kind of, I just actually turn a wrench during the day for a car lot and then piddle here in the evenings and weekends. And that's pretty much the story of how I got into the wreckers. I mean, I kind of got a little off track there for a second, but you kind of get the gist. I've been fooling with wreckers since I was, like I said, about 19 years old when I bought the first wrecker. And learned a lot over the years from a lot of older guys. You know, and that's something you guys, younger guys, if you watch my channel, man, get with an older guy. Listen to them stories. Hang out with them, because them older guys will teach you some stuff. If they like you, they will teach you some stuff. And I'm telling you, the guy I worked for when I was younger, that old boy, he liked me. And I'll tell you, he passed away quite a few years ago, and he just was an awesome, awesome dude. He was from Altoona, Pennsylvania. He was an old timer. Everything was old school with him. Sometimes he was a little hard dealing with him because he was set in his ways. But I'll tell you, that old boy, he knew his shit. And you couldn't, when it come to running a wrecker, there wasn't anybody around to run a wrecker like he could. He knew how to get them cars out of the side of mountains and down in valleys and stuff. It was unbelievable. So I'm going to wrap it up because it's getting a little lengthy and I want to hold you guys up. So look, holler at your boy. Keep it reals. The next video will be, we're going to take the torch to that wrecker and start burning that front suspension out. I hope. I got to get some of this crap out of here. I'm getting ready to put this thing up on the lift this evening and finish up the frame rails on this Jeep. They're really, really rusty. It was a project I started on a couple weeks ago, and then I had to get it out of here to get another project in here. I did some cam and lifters on a Chevy Avalanche. It just fought me tooth and nail, and now I got to roll this thing back in and start working on it. So look, holla at your boy. Keep it real. I'll catch you on the next one.